To import pictures, it's the same process. We now have a smaller import arrow at the very top. We select it and we find our photo library, our photo folder, I should say. We can import all of the photos. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is find my first picture, and I think I'll start with this picture of Jill Stein. So I can either drag it down, or click on the little plus in the lower right-hand corner and do the same exact thing. Over here, it tells me by default, well, it's 4 seconds. That's the default length. If I want to look at my defaults, I can go to iMovie up here, select preferences, and it tells me that the default photo duration for all my pictures is 4 seconds, and that the default transition time between each picture is 1 second. That's pretty good, but you should really avoid having every picture the same exact length. You should be very critical of how long the photo is, and change it depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your editing. If you want fast-paced editing, you want slow-paced editing, if you want your pictures to match a particular scene. Over here where it says photo placement and Ken Burns is a style of animation that basically tries to make the photo come to life. It'll zoom in or zoom out or pan across, but you also want to carefully control Ken Burns effect, whether you use it or not, things like that, and I'll show you that a little later. So here's my photo that's 4 seconds long. I might make it a little longer. I can just do that by stretching it out, by dragging it out the side. And then I can tell you it's pretty boring right now. I might add a couple of pictures in, and I'll choose that one and this one and perhaps one more. Maybe this one. And then now I have a series of pictures, and notice that with all 4 second photos, you're filling up your whole video pretty quickly. And I'm going to make these pictures a little bit shorter. And I haven't really selected pictures based on what's going on in the soundtrack. That'll come a little later. So I'll wind back here. Remember, I can hit the space bar to start.
Jill Stein believes that the shortest distance between poverty and wealth, economic, social, intellectual, and spiritual wealth, is an education. The youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow, and all young people deserve the chance to succeed. As president, Stein will pass legislation that...
So I'll make this one a little shorter. This one a little shorter too. That one a little shorter. Now, it's pretty boring without any other background music. Now, I would highly recommend that if you're going to use other music, you choose instrumental music rather than music with a vocal track, because your ear will compete between the voiceover, if you're using a voiceover, and the vocals in the music, which will make it really hard to pay attention to the message of your video. If you want to just use some of the default built-in soundtracks or instrumental tracks that are in the program, there are a lot of good choices. You can just go to audio, and you can sort by genre, and they're called jingles. There's all sorts of special effects and machinery and things like that. But if you go and you look at the jingles, then you can sort it by time. And since you're making a 30-second video, you probably want to find something that's around the 30-second mark. And here's where you start to think also about who your target audience is and what the mood is that you want to communicate. So if you want a jovial mood, you're going to choose something different than something that is ominous. Or you might want to split your video up where if you're contrasting your candidate with your opponent, you might want to use ominous music for them and more cheerful music for your candidate. Just for example's sake, we will choose this. It's called time lapse. You can preview them all over here. And so long as you have at least one image in your timeline, you can drag this down and it will then be corresponding to that first image. You'll see there's a green line. Now it's here.
Jill Stein believes that the shortest distance between poverty and wealth.
And you'll first obviously notice that the music is too loud. So there's a horizontal line. So I can drag the line. I can boost up the voiceover. And I can bring down the time lapse. I can even do a fade in. Drag that little slider over. I can fade that in. And I can fade it out towards the end. Whoops. There we go. All right, now.
Jill Stein believes that the shortest distance between poverty and wealth, economic, social, intellectual, and spiritual wealth, is an education. The youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow, and all young people deserve the chance.
One last thing I'll show you at this point is transitions. If you select transition over here, you have all sorts of transition choices. And I'm going to recommend that you stick to things that are in the first row that are a little bit more subtle, like the dissolves and things like this, circle opens and closes, mosaics. Unless you carefully control what you're doing with them, they can look a little cheesy and they don't really add a lot to your project. But some can be very dynamic and helpful. So just choose carefully. I kind of like cross dissolve and cross blur. Seem to go really, really well. And fade to black works well as well. So I'm going to drag a couple cross dissolves in. Maybe I'll do one cross dissolve and one blur. And I wouldn't recommend you use transitions between every single shot. It gets a little overdone. And you can also change the length of your transition. But we can do that. If you double click on it, you'll notice where it says duration time, I can change it from 1 second to 2 seconds here, and then apply. And now let's have a look at what we have.
Jill Stein believes that the shortest distance between poverty and wealth, economic, social, intellectual, and spiritual wealth, is an education. The youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow, and all young people deserve the chance to succeed. As president, Stein will pass legislation that will provide